This assignment is going to be dealing with toned paper and Conte crayon, various colors in Conte crayon. It's a kind of limited number of colors in Conte crayon: white, brown, black, and Conte crayon are hard sticks that are a little bit like pastels, but much more like hard chalks. And you're going to be using a paper which has a kind of neutral brownish light tinge to it, so that we're unlike all the other drawings in the past where we started out with stark white, and with a graphite or ink and other materials we work down to a darker value. Here we're sort of starting out in a kind of light middle value. So long story short is simply to show you some things first off, to tell you what we're doing. Here's a beautiful drawing here, rather complex subject for drawing one, but you can see how in the petals of the flower that the color of the paper becomes more than simply a mark, okay? You're using the color of the paper to integrate itself into the structure of the value, the light and dark of the Conte crayon. So we're really working in two directions here. We're working, yes, with the darker browns and, if need be, black, but more importantly and more differently and more challenging is the idea of working with a very light value, the stark white value of the Conte crayon, and you also have a pencil which is called General's White Charcoal Pencil for subtler kinds of outlines and things. But you've got a white medium which is going to give you from very, very stark, compressed, dense, strong highlights to what you can see in this flower are fairly subtler integrations of the paper color into the white itself, so that you're using the color of the paper as part of the value structure. Another example are these pussy willows here on a large piece of toned paper. They do use the white Conte crayon for the highlights on the images themselves. They also throw in, and this is not advised really, but it works in this drawing, but she has used the graphite pencil for another kind of dark. It's possible to use that. I tend to use it on a smaller scale, but by and large it works beautifully in terms of rounding and giving form to these things that are volumes in space. She's blown it up, to an immense kind of scale, but the very complexity, the very crowdedness of this stuff, composition-wise, makes it a rather beautiful drawing. Gorgeous, immaculate, detailed drawing of flowers. This one done, yes, with the Conte, but also with what I talked about as it's called General's White Charcoal, that wood encased pencil that you have in your kit that is able to be sharpened like a regular pencil. It's essentially a compressed white chalk within a wooden pencil handle. And you can see in this one where she's really done meticulous sorts of detail in the flowers themselves, that still at that kind of obsessive level, at that small scale level, you end up with the color of the paper not being obliterated or gone over or covered by the medium, but becoming part of the structure of lights and darks within the image itself. Okay, this baseball is done with the same medium. Here he has eliminated some of the mark making. He's used it more like pastels, which is indeed one way to do it. He's blended with his finger a little bit and made it into a kind of immaculate value structure. But even with the blending, there is still the quality of the paper underneath all this stuff and mixing with this stuff that helps to give you the value structure. First, a word about the kind of materials you're using. Obviously, we talked about the toned paper, which is a kind of light middle value. This one, warmish kind of brown. I think it's called sanguine commercially. And it's a little bit bigger than your normal pad paper. And for the first drawing I'm asking you to do is to keep that one big paper intact and do the best you can to do another practice sheet, as you've done in each of these drawings, each of these assignments. You've made a wonderful effort at doing a kind of sketch pad, Leonardo notebook, crowded surface of different subjects, different possibilities, experimentations, failures, successes, in-betweenies, evolving things. And the kind of material you're using, first off, would be, for the most part, these Conte crayons. These come in a pack in your kit, and they are kind of compressed chalk, fairly hard. Okay, they don't crumble. They don't blend terribly well with finger blending as pastels. They have a kind of hardness to them, but they leave a nice mark, and they can play a game with the toned paper that's very important. So you have a white, unbroken. You have a kind of achromatic, dull brown, which is very important. The white and the brown should be the two that you're using mostly in these particular kinds of drawings. If you get to shadows or values on the subject that are fairly dark, I would go to the black. There is this wonderful brown here that's a little bit more like an orange brown that might be used in some instances, but I would use it sparingly because it will give you a kind of intense color compared to the rest of the neutral colors in the palette. So in starting out these drawings, I would use very faintly the white charcoal pencil to make a faint outline. I think that's going to be the kind of thing that will become invisible or can be erased very easily in the drawing when it's finished. And although you could start from the dark edge to the lighter edge, just because this is such a new phenomenon, using the white against the tone paper, I'm going to start with the white because I think that becomes the newest and more challenging sort of thing to use. It doesn't really matter which end you start at; they're equally important in both directions. But as I'm looking at this white sphere that is on the table here, I'm putting in strokes that go up to that start at the edge of the object. Okay, stay away from heavy-duty outlines if you can, as in most of your drawings, and move away from that. Okay, doing a kind of light side of the moon, a kind of planet in sunlight value structure that goes across the sphere. Just because my handwriting, my mark making, almost unconsciously like a default position, is a little bit like cross hatching, I'm going to start with that particular gesture. But you may do any kind of light mark or light soft blending as you move across this. So start really subtly and lightly, no pun intended. Don't go for the big sharp contrast right away, like all of your drawings to this point, even using just the straightforward graphite pencil and the pen and ink. You're building things up gradually. That way you have a much greater chance of getting control and accuracy in terms of those areas that are going to be the lightest versus the darkest. So I'm going to emphasize the lightest edge here a little bit more, and it could get to a point where it's going to become fairly dense and almost white. I could get a lot denser, but I'm going to keep it for now more controllable. So I'm moving across this, and notice how this no man's land, this sort of in-between area here, weaves the color of the paper, combines, controls and encompasses the color of the paper with the mark of the Conte crayon. So without getting too dark too quickly, I'm going to reverse emphasis and get to this side, which I see as the darker edge, and moving that almost in a kind of reverse copy, value-wise, as what you did with the light white Conte crayon on the other side. And again, I'm going slowly, not cramming it in like the first grade coloring book, okay, inside an outline, but trying to open it up to, trying to make it live with the color of the paper and move out into this area that is the in-between value. You know, just as you did those pretty accurate value charts with your cross-hatching, okay? So without using cross-hatching or any kind of mechanical device or technique, you know, use a kind of repetitive stroke, a soft repetitive stroke that would allow you to have the paper show through. Okay, I'm emphasizing, maybe exaggerating a little bit in the darkness here, but that will help you see what's going on. Okay, and it may be that this middle value, if you squint your eyes, becomes a kind of middle value that is the very tone of the paper itself. I'll get a little bit darker down here to have it sit more solidly on the paper itself. You could smudge it, you could blend it a little bit, but I prefer you try to keep it to the mark itself as you're moving along. And if indeed this is looking awfully dark on this side, but it'll be complemented, it'll be contrasted with what could be over this side, which is much more in my actual subject here, much more of a brilliant white. So I'm now, not in the very beginning, but now I'm feeling more comfortable at making this a more dense, a more brilliant, a more reflective value on this side. And as you're using this stuff, and you're bound to make something that seems to be a mistake or something that's a little too dense or a little too overdone, or a mark that doesn't belong in a given place. I mean, that's fine. That's going to happen. And with the Conte, you're free to use the kneaded eraser and the plastic eraser. You know, and just as in our graphite drawings, the plastic eraser becomes almost a kind of drawing mark, almost a kind of, yours is more cubic than this, but it becomes almost a kind of drawing mark that can eat back into the marks that you've already put down. You're almost leaving a mark that is the color of the paper by using that one. The kneaded eraser is more like a kind of sponge, a kind of mop to pick up larger areas, and can actually fade those areas or make them less strong as you're filling in the volume of this thing here. I feel that this thing here is a little too strong up here, so I'm going to make it less so. So you've got a lot of control between your mark making and your erasers, not only as delete buttons, but also as mark makers to make this thing more accurate. So I'm going to do a cast shadow now underneath, and I'm going to have it go out from the bottom. It's usually elliptical, a sort of long elliptical thing if you've got a light from the side. I'm going to do that. And here it may be the fact that you need an even darker value, and I did say that you do have in your kit the black Conte crayon. And just as in our graphite pencil drawings, it's good to start out and good to be aware of the fact that cast shadows, tend to be the darkest and the most dense up against the subject, okay, up against the object, okay, underneath, and that as they move away, and you can obviously do this with your eraser too, as they move away, they get lighter and less defined because they're invaded by ambient light from each side. Now I'm going to use my black right here to get close in. And it's up to you as to how absolutely photographically detailed you want to get. I'm sort of, from my years of using my own style, have a kind of looser, rougher mark making, because I tended to do lots of murals that were done in chalk on a very large scale, so that my marks were maybe a foot or so across. But it's up to you. If you want to get fine and detailed, like that rose drawing we saw initially, you're welcome to, or you're welcome to get a little bit rougher and do, as long as you sort of generally follow the shadows that are in front of you, generally follow those shadows, you'll get things that are indicative of what you see in front of you. I'm seeing a real strong highlight in this arc here. So this, with this most simple object, is a demonstration of what we're trying to get in this particular assignment. Now, the subjects you can choose for yourself. I've got a number of them listed in the text that accompanies this video. You've seen some examples first. I also think that things like utensils or tools, especially steel things that are light and reflected, this does become a beautiful material with which to do translucent glass, transparent glass. But that's, if you're really ambitious to do that, you're welcome to. But it is another level of complexity. It's tough enough at first, I think, to get the idea of an opaque, solid object that is reflective of light is in shadow as well.